The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, General Horowitz. I have a very high regard for you. I think you know that. Your report states that various witnesses told you that the mishandling of classified information was a persistent practice of the State Department, and that the State Department was so screwed up in the handling of classified information that if they'd wanted to prosecute Secretary Clinton, that they'd had to prosecute 150 State Department people. Does that basically invalidate the statute?
It doesn't. That's what they told us was one of their rationales, though, for it.
Well, I don't know if you're going to allow me to do this with you, but I want to do this in regard to the statement of an insurance policy, okay? It's not in regard to the Russia probe. I know that's coming later. But obviously, Andrew McCabe put Peter Strzok in charge of the Russia probe. Are you aware that Strzok went to London in July of 2016?
I've learned of that through various public reports.
And I think it would be fair to say that McCabe approved that trip and approved the expenditures for that.
I don't know the answer one way or the other.
I just wonder if what other justification there could have been for a trip to London at that particular time other than the Russia probe. And what concerns me was that when he returned, he almost immediately launched that probe. Mm-hmm. That McCabe, I think, approved him going to London. He came back and he launched it. Do you think there's any possibility that Strzok had prior knowledge that Christopher Steele was assembling the dossier?
You know, that's one of the issues we have been asked to look at, and so we're in the middle of that work on how that played out with regard to the FISA application.
And I'm glad that you made that point, because I think another question I need to ask, was there any possibility that the dossier was at least part of Strzok's insurance policy? Because that statement came later, mm-hmm. I believe.
Right. The insurance policy statement came up on
Well, here's what concerns me about it, is that you've got McCabe, whose wife received almost $700,000 in campaign contributions from the Clintons, was almost 40% of her total campaign contributions. And obviously there was a very strong relationship. McCabe put Strzok in charge of this. He either sent Strzok to London or allowed him to go, approved it. Do you think that either of them had knowledge that the Clinton campaign paid for the dossier?
I don't know the answer as I sit here, but that, is something as part of the review that we're doing. It will be touched on in terms of the dossier.
Well, and I appreciate that. I look forward to reading that report. And I understand, what you're trying to do. But let me ask you this in regard to bias. And I want to be maybe the one guy that doesn't go over time today. All things being equal, and if someone said they thought that another Inspector General would be more qualified than you to do this investigation, I think we'd both agree that there was some bias involved there. It might be qualified, it might be justified, but there'd be some bias there that they preferred someone else over you, okay? Mm-hmm. But if that same person called you and your colleagues pieces of crap, and that's not what the word they used, or repeatedly referred to you as loathsome or an idiot, awful, used the F word in regard to you, referred to your team as retarded, crazies, or as Mrs. Clinton said, deplorables, I think that would go beyond bias. I think you might even consider that extreme prejudice or maybe even extreme animus. Would you agree with that?
Okay, I think, as we've talked about, when we
I'm just asking this, hypothetically, if I were responsible for the job, the assignments you got, and I made comments privately like that about you that later became public, how would you feel about that?
Oh, I think it certainly is evidence of a biased state of mind like we...
But it would indicate that I had made a determination that I was going to prevent you from advancing your career. I just would ask you, would you have any confidence that you would be treated fairly under those circumstances?
I think you'd have reason for concern, and it's precisely why this is so problematic.
And especially if it were persistent right to the very end. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.